we cover Marine A first?
Can we cover Marine A first?
This is within your wheelhouse, so
Okay,
I'll let
go
you
on.
take the lead on this. Go on,
Take
set
the
the scene like Jack and Ori. So I'll sit back for Shep story time.
So 2008, Marine A happened as an incident, but it didn't go to the public for another couple of years yet because certain things didn't arise, but I'll get into that. So Sergeant Blackman, now known as Marine A, or known throughout the trial as Marine A, was on his second tour of duty in Afghanistan. Right at the end of this second tour, essentially that their troop, or I think it was J Company 4-2 Commander, had gone out on a patrol like seeking Taliban fighters who attacked a local command post, and they were on the run essentially, so they were going to fetch them or to go and engage them, right? They got into a firefight. Long story short, they got into a firefight with a couple of insurgents. Upon doing so, they called in air support. The air support came in, the Apache came in and located the insurgents, rained down fucking like thousands of anti-tank bullets essentially that are made to rip through armour.
Like big fuck off rounds.
Yeah, big massive shells. Killed a few of the insurgents, left one as good as dead, but not quite dead. They did a reorg, which is when you essentially reconvene on the position. So on the position you're trying to clear, you'll all come in, you'll stop, and you'll assess casualties, ammunition, all that kind of stuff. They're assessing casualties. The obvious casualty, none of the lads are injured, so the obvious casualty is the insurgent who's been ripped to shreds by these rounds. Sergeant Blackman is then faced with a decision. Obviously, the right decision by the Geneva Convention to apply first aid and casevac them to Camp Bastion, at the time the major hospital. His other decision, which isn't really a decision in anyone's mind, is to kind of either leave him there, in which case he's probably going to die, or end his suffering, quote unquote. And he chose the latter. So he pulls out a pistol. He says a little bit on comms to sort of tell the lads what he's doing. Shoots this bloke in the chest, essentially. And that then doesn't get mentioned. Nothing happens. It's on some helmet cams. That gets deleted.
Which I think comes back to haunt him in the end.
Well, no. So the regular lads who were there, that was deleted. There was a reservist on the patrol whose camera footage didn't get deleted. That's what came up, I think. So, yeah, essentially he goes back to the UK, everything's fine, whatever. A couple of years later, or a couple of months later, it comes out that this footage in MOD, in this sort of investigating a different issue, got to grips with this footage and audio from that patrol, that particular patrol. Obviously, there was a rogue bullet that got shot, and there was a video that went with that. And so they were starting to investigate what happened. Obviously, interviewing the guilty parties. But yeah, this sparked a massive uproar in the public because it's a war hero, essentially. Someone who's been to war a couple of times, fought for this country, done a lot of good for the Marines and for the UK, but obviously made a horrendous decision in the heat of battle, which there's no excuse for. He got found guilty eventually for killing someone, for murder, was in prison, and a couple of years later a massive appeal started to happen where there was a big public backing, and he eventually got tried for manslaughter and then got released. But that's the sort of long and short of it. There's obviously a bit more detail which we'll get into, but just to give the picture of what happened, that was kind of
he's in a firefight. He's presented with an enemy soldier who's as good as dead.
Yeah.
In the heat of the battle, he's then shot the bloke because realistically he's not going to survive anyway.
Yeah.
And years later down the line, it's transpired that he's broken the Geneva Convention and he's basically been tried as a murderer.
Yeah, essentially.
So that's effectively what's happened there.
Yeah. So in that moment, he's obviously, like I say, he should have called in a evacuation helicopter, and that would have. Bear in mind, by the way, they're in really hostile territory at this point.
Yeah.
So when that helicopter flies in, there's no guarantee it's going to land. There's no guarantee it's not going to get shot out of the sky by someone watching.
That's mad, isn't it?
So he's got to consider all these things, and the right thing to do, obviously, is to call the helicopter in, whatever. That's the right thing to do if you're sat at Whitehall making a decision in a nice air-conditioned office with a coffee, right? But in the heat of wherever he was, in the context of what's going on, it's not quite that black and white. And I think that was the point of the whole trial.
It's like those shit role plays, isn't it? They do on like health and safety awareness days.
Yeah.
Where it's like, stop. What should he have done? It's like, he should
sure.
have treated the enemy as one of his own and called in a helo evac to take him to like Camp Bastion or something.
Yeah, exactly. So the first thing to note is that what we're always taught about LOAC, so law of armed conflict, is that if it's your honestly held belief that life is in danger, then you're able to pull the trigger. You're able to act, right? It wasn't, because he's unarmed, this bloke, at this point. Yeah. There's no way he can conceivably say someone's life was in danger. So he's in the wrong.
Theoretically, if they'd have just left him and done nothing, he would have just bled out probably within minutes anyway.
Yeah.
Because he's been literally ripped to shreds by anti-tank rounds, what he said. He'd just be
unless he's an actual Terminator.
Apparently the official report said he'd been hit over 100 times.
Yeah. So
I don't know how there's anything of him left.
I don't know. Apparently he was still alive. He was still moving when he shot him. And so when he shoots him, you see on the video, they don't show it anywhere obviously, but he clutches his chest apparently.
Fucking, is his bloke nails?
He's fucking Terminator, bro.
Yeah, true.
You know what I mean?
I'll be back.
Maybe he will be. But there's a lot that goes into this split-second decision, and eventually, like we were talking about the other day, he gets tried with. What's the word? What was the word they used? What's the condition? He kind of, not condition, but
adjustment disorder.
Adjustment disorder. So essentially, when your morals or whatever adjust because of what you've been exposed to, essentially. So this bloke, 2 tours of horrendous place. That tour was particularly stressful because he was the leader. He was a troop sergeant. So part of the documentary that I watched was right at the start of that 6-month tour. There's about 100 Marines who are getting deployed forward from where Sergeant Blackman's kind of company is. One or two of those Marines are kind of being mentored by. So in the Marines, you get assigned mentors essentially in the chain of command. So one of his mentorees was going on that forward deployment with the 100 blokes. 2 days later, he's sat there listening to the radio coming in, and hears there's been a blast, and this guy who's been mentoring for however long has been killed in that blast. So that's one thing right at the start of the tour. It's not going to be fucking easy to deal with, is it?
No.
The other thing, because he sat there helpless essentially, just listening to this thing come in. And then the other thing that happened halfway through that tour was he got flown back for his dad who died in the UK. Did all the shit for that funeral or whatever, then flew back. So again, these things are all happening. He's obviously done 2 tours at this point. At this point as well, you're starting to think that, is there any point into what we're doing at the moment?
Yeah, there's this disillusionment.
Disillusion with what you're doing. You're losing loads of lads. Loads of lads are going home injured. It's like heat of the conflict. You know, it's people going down left, right and centre. You can't actually see any noticeable change in terms of you've been there before. So you've been there a couple of years ago. You've been there now. Is there any noticeable change? Probably not that much. So you're thinking, all this fucking life is getting lost. All these good lads are losing limbs, whatever.
Yeah, like your own family relationships back home are breaking down. Because you're in fucking Afghan.
For no fucking reason.
What's the point? Yeah.
Yeah, so you're really disillusioned by this point. And by the way, I'm not sticking up for what he did. I'm just painting the full picture.
Yeah, you've got to contextualise it, haven't you?
Yeah. So essentially, this is why they found that he had adjustment disorder, because he was in a rather unique set of circumstances.
Yeah. It's like, well, from what I read, you kind of like disorientated effectively.
Yeah.
Because you're being pulled from pillar to post, you're under that much stress, you can't really fully comprehend your actions.
Yeah, well, again, you can imagine how distorted morals feel when you're in a obviously it's easy sat here right now where we know black and white, killing someone's bad.
Yeah, he shouldn't have shot him, he should have called for a helicopter. But in the back of his mind, he's thinking, well, we've already lost X amount of people. if I call in this helicopter and it just gets an RPG
Yeah, that's another 8
immediately,
dead.
that's another 8 dead. Let alone a fucking helo. How much are they cost?
Another firefight's going to
Yeah.
come in. Then we've got, right, so now we've got a casualty evacuate this bloke on foot. That's 2 of my lads in my section of 8. So
Who
a
are
fourth of
effectively
my section who are
helpless.
helpless. That's
And this-
2 guns that we've lost.
And this bloke is effectively going to die. Well, I mean, it can't be said for certain, but like,
yeah.
you'd say like 95% chance, 98% chance he's
Yeah.
fucked.
Basically
Anyway,
dead
you're
already.
pissing in the wind, really, aren't you?
Yeah, so it's almost going to be a pointless exercise. It's going to potentially cause you a lot of, obviously, stress and potentially loss of life, loss of limb. Because, don't forget as well, the sergeant is right on the ground with these lads. So, you know, he'd have told their families when they leave that he's going to do his best to keep
Bring him back.
so-and-so alive, right? And bring him back to him. So all that's in the back of his head, and it's as far from a black and white decision as you can probably get. And this is why it's kind of annoying when you get people who are completely so far removed from the actual situation making the overall decision, which is what ends up happening.
Yeah, again, so like you said, it's easy for someone in Whitehall or in the UN headquarters in New York
To write up this
nice dossier of why he's guilty.
Yeah.
But like if you're not there, you can never really empathise.
No. And there's something interesting. So, you know Chris Tyrrell?
Yeah.
So he's featured a lot in this documentary because he's actually on that tour with them, and he was on the tour. He was just in a different place, but he was on the tour. And he was, because that was a pretty hairy deployment, I think, by all accounts. He was lying in a patrol base one day because he's a war reporter, so he goes around with the proper embedded with the troops, right? And he's lying there. There's like grenades going out. There's bombs going off everywhere, and he's like, I'm laying. He's writing a diary whenever he's in a war zone. He writes a diary, and one of the lines he writes is quite interesting. He goes, "As with each passing day, the line between a Medal of Honor and a war crime becomes ever so thin. And so
it's a good line, that.
It is a good line, but that was before this happened, which is interesting because a few months down the line, that actually did happen.
Yeah. It's like the fog of war, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
It all just descends, and the shit hits the fan.
Yeah.
And people are left with all these like mental disorders because it's just
Well,
they can't readjust in reality because of what they've
that's
seen.
That's the issue coming back as well.
Yeah.
Coming back to normality, but you can quite clearly tell. Not that I'm an amazing judge of character, but the interviews I've seen Sergeant Blackman in, he's not a cold-blooded killer, murderer, crazy person, right? So he would have just been end of the tour. He's like, right, the lads have got left. Let's fucking get them home, shall we?
Yeah.
And let's do whatever it takes to get them home. And the audio, you've heard the audio?
No.
I've
literally only read about this. Okay. I haven't watched any audio.
Okay, the audio is chilling, to be fair, because when you hear it, obviously out of context, it's not nice. So they published the PRR, so the headset to headset communication of the lads. This is always insular, so it's within the section, so all the lads can hear it. The hierarchy can't hear it unless he presses a different button. He'd been fucked then.
But apparently he said on that comms that I've just broken the Geneva Convention.
Yeah, he did. This is what I mean. So he says, which way? So there was a helo.
He's kind of incriminated himself there.
Massively. Yeah. So there was a helo overhead, the one that shot him initially. What he asks on comms, he goes, "Which way did that Apache go?" And one of the lads goes south, so he knows it's gone, so he can't see him. Right. Yeah. This is the other thing. That's incriminating. And then you hear the shots, and then you hear him go. Right, obviously that doesn't go anywhere, lads. I've just broke the Geneva Convention. And then all the lads go, yeah, Roger. But they're only saying that because they, at that point, they don't fucking know what to do.
Yeah.
That would have not even been in their heads that he's going to do that.
No. Well, there's not a lot they can do. He's shot him now.
There's nothing they can do. And he's their sergeant. He's the most senior bloke on the ground. So it's a bit savage. And then he goes and he says something else to the bloke, who's like to the tune of encouraging him to die faster, essentially.
And then I think later, Blackman claimed that the guy was actually already dead.
Yeah, that was his initial line.
When he was referring to breaking the Geneva Convention, he was on about desecrating a body, which is also a war crime, but obviously not as frowned upon as as execution.
Yeah, and again,
which again probably, I don't know, like he probably didn't do himself any favours in the long run.
No,
but he probably didn't think it was going to escalate to that extent.
What he didn't think was they had clip 5, so they had clip 4, which was all the way up until the shooting, but they had clip 5, which was a video shot of the bloke moving, and then he shot him, and then he moves again. So you can't say he was dead already.
No. So what do we make of this as a whole then, to bring into conclusions? How long did he serve in prison in total?
8 years.
I think. 8 years. And he's out now, isn't he?
He's out now, yeah.
What do we make of that?
It's difficult, isn't it?
Bearing in mind, right, there were probably other British troops that did this in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that there are. I'm just we can assume that.
I think balance of probability.
War crimes are committed in every theatre of war.
Balance of probability, this happened more.
Yeah.
Right.
So he's probably in his cell thinking, like, I know of people that have done this.
Yeah. Probably.
But they haven't been convicted of it.
Well, the damning evidence was the cons.
Yeah, he's just basically the wrong place, wrong time.
Yeah, and look, again, we're not excusing him, but it is. You've just got to factor in how difficult of an experience that would be. And I know there's people who can't even hear that, you know. And they're like, no, but he shouldn't have done it. But you're just completely so far removed from ever being in that scenario, ever being that stressed, that run down, that fatigued. There's so much that kind of goes into it. Your decision making, even when you're when you're malnourished and underslept.
I get fucking panicky when like my email inbox is too full. Do you know what I mean? My decision making goes haywire then.
You
know what I mean? Yeah, when I'm trying to organise a fucking piss up.
Yeah.
That's too much for me. Let alone trying to actually like
keep 8 blokes alive
in an active war zone.
Yeah, where any step or lean could be your last.
Yeah, exactly.
It's absurd. Like I was saying, kind of towards the start though, this was the documentary I was referring to where you see the lads walking around and how hostile it is. That would have been fucking so hard to deal with.
Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed that clip.
If you want to see the full conversation, then head to the top link in the description.